All right, so I am going to talk today about how we are making decisions, especially in Q4, how we're making our decisions when we have only part-time data. We have only a partial data, especially in most of our ad account. Really quick, I'll just give a quick, brief history of myself and my background. So I started out college back in 2013, 2014. I actually managed a retail store, which I hated. I hated all logistics, inventory planning, management, and stuff like that. But I did love the marketing. I liked bringing people into the store. So at the same time, I also got hired as the marketing director for this subscription product that was for runners. I was a runner. I wasn't qualified to be the marketing director at all, but I was a runner. And so they hired me. And that was when I actually first started running Facebook ads and digital ads, was for that subscription product back in 2014. So it's been about 7 years I've been running paid traffic. 2015, I went to work for an agency, Oz Marketing. I had run Facebook ads. And at the time in 2015, that qualified me to be the head of paid social at Oz Marketing. I was also the head of paid social and the only person in the paid social department because, I was the only one who even had touched Facebook ads at that point. And then in 2017, I left there, went off on my own. I started Explosive Growth Marketing. In 2020, Explosive Growth Marketing got acquired by Structured Agency, Structured Social. Structured Agency is actually the correct name, but Structured Social is what most people know us by. Yeah, and that's where we are now. Now I'm overseeing several $1 million in ad spend per month across 20, 30, 40 e-commerce brands. So here's how we're kind of just sharing my learnings of how we're doing things within that purview. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. How are we treating and reading our data right now? So kind of what the one thing you must have for a big Q4 is knowing the attribution model that you're going to use to read your data and to make decisions. How you find your on-platform targets. You need to be able to make decisions on Facebook ads, on Google ads. I'm going to focus in a lot on Facebook today, but this applies to all of our traffic channels. And then some shifts we're seeing. So just kind of some different things that we're seeing that will help you kind of put fuel on that Q4 strategy. So I'm going to talk about getting out of the black box a little bit. A lot of these algorithmic traffic platforms are a little bit black boxy, Facebook especially. And then angle testing versus just creative iterations and how we're seeing some big wins on Google at the moment. All right, so here's the one thing you must have in order to have a big Q4. Q4 is a big media buying moment, especially during big days in Q4, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, stuff like that. Your media buying platforms, your ad platforms, they become day trading platforms, right? So we're putting in $1 and we're getting out $4 or $5 or $6 or $3 or whatever it is. So the core thing that we must do for every brand that we're working with is narrowing in on that on-platform target to hit so that we can properly day trade the platform, right? So if we log in to our Facebook Ads Manager and we don't know what a win looks like and what a loss looks like in terms of whatever it is, cost per purchase, ROAS, whatever, we can't day trade that we can't properly day trade that platform. So this requires a major mindset shift for us from the way we've always done it. So the way we've done it in the past kind of looks something like this. In this example, we have a fictional brand that drives most of its sales from Facebook and sells one main thing. So if they have an average order value of $100, their ROAS target on Facebook would be 2, and that would be their day trading target. So you can see I kind of asterisk that target that we've used in the past to day trade. Now what that looks like, since our Facebook ROAS and cost per purchase numbers and conversion numbers are all over the place, is essentially in that same situation, we have a ROAS target of something. We don't know what. We don't know what the right ROAS target is when we log into the platform. So here's essentially how we step through that, right? And so in that same situation, we're going to look at what is our marketing efficiency ratio when we're meeting that desired net profit of 20%. So marketing efficiency ratio is just kind of a fancy way of saying high, blended ROAS or high level ROAS, right? So it's all of your revenue divided by all of your ad spend across all channels. So if our MER when we're meeting our target is around 2, and then we calculate our ratio of what does the Facebook ROAS look like when we're at that 2 MER. But let's say our Facebook ROAS to MER ratio is 73%. Then we know our on-platform target on Facebook, in this example, would be about 1.46. And in this example, that would be pretty accurate. So you can see in our new situation, we kind of have 2 day trading guidelines. We have our overall MER, which we're going to kind of be able to monitor on a running basis during these day trading times, of 2, right? We want to stay at or above that 2 level. And then we have our on-platform target of 1.46, and that's how we're going to decide what to cut, what to keep, what to scale, all of that stuff. basically that CPA or ROAS number that we see on Facebook, it used to be very important for us to actually assess our profitability, right? So we used to be able to say, hey, that ROAS target of 2, that means we're profitable. Now a ROAS target of 1.46, if that 1.46 on the far right was true, then we would be like, oh my gosh, we're not profitable. But we just know it's not true now, right? So it used to be important to assess our overall profitability. Now it's only important within the context of Facebook. And that's true for every paid traffic channel for comparing paid traffic channels. So if you have a 3 ROAS on Google and a 0.5 ROAS on Facebook, that means nothing. That does not mean Google's outperforming Facebook. So that 3 ROAS on Google is only important to your campaigns and ad sets on Google. Same with the 0.5 ROAS on Facebook. So if you are someone who's following along and you're like me, you're kind of like someone who pokes holes in people's theories and working models and finds problems with them, you're probably thinking, what if I run more than one traffic channel? So this is where we're going to get into attribution model a little bit. You don't have to change your attribution model, but you do need to be aware of what your attribution model is. So we have kind of 2 types of models. We have what I call like a hard model, a hard attribution model. So this would be your people who are kind of like firm last click, firm first click model. The flexible model accounts for the 1 + 1 = 3 effect. So typically in practice, what a flexible attribution model looks like is you kind of look at your traffic channels, ROAS, you look at Google ROAS, Facebook ROAS, and stuff like that. You look at Google Analytics and what it's reporting, and you kind of like make inference decisions to decide where you should put more dollars and stuff like that, and what you think is really contributing to your success, right? So I call that like an intuitive model, right? You're not really fully sure what your attribution model is, but it's somewhat intuitive. So again, you do not have to change your attribution model. You just need to be aware of what you're doing, because this next part that takes into account what you're already doing. So now that you know that archetype, that attribution model that you're using, here is what you need to do to find that metric that you can day trade on the platform, on Facebook. So if you're a hard model, you need that internal source of truth. My favorite one is separate funnels for each channel, right? So I have like a specific funnel landing page, checkout process for each traffic channel, that, only sales from that traffic channel are going to go through that funnel. But, you could be using separate URLs or a tracker or whatever. So the method here essentially is, you're going to do this. So let's just use this example. Let's say you have a total sales in that, individual funnel for Facebook ads of $1,000, and you have spent total spend on channel is $500. That means you spent $500 on Facebook. That means what I would call your true channel MER is 2.0. Or your true channel ROAS, if you want to call it that. I call it MER if we're not, looking at it on platform. And let's say your Facebook ROAS for that same time period you're looking at. So let's say this happened over the course of like a week, right? Let's say your Facebook ROAS for that time period is 1.2. You're going to divide that 1.2 by 2, and you're going to get your ROAS to MER ratio, which I referred to earlier, of 60%. So your Facebook target ROAS is 60% of your MER target. So let's say in this scenario that your MER target is 3. You want to make $3 for every dollar you spend on average on advertising. That means your Facebook ROAS target is 60% of that. And in this case, your Facebook ROAS target would be 1.8. It might be a little difficult to follow, but, kind of go back through it and do it a couple times for yourself. So here's the same example. I'm not going to talk through it, but here's the same example for if you like value CPA or cost per purchase over ROAS, right? So this would be for our free plus shipping offers or consumables or things where they're really looking at CPA a little bit more than ROAS. And then you just want to recalculate this on a regular interval. So you want to be making sure that you revisit this like every Monday or every Wednesday, or if you're running really high volume, maybe it's every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you're running really low volume, maybe it's once a month on the 3rd, right? So you just want to recalculate it on a regular and consistent interval so that you're kind of building a model of like what your target ROAS should be and what's happening to your target ROAS over time. Is it getting further away from your true MER or closer or what? So for flexible modeling, it's a little trickier, but here's the stuff you need. You need your overall MER CPA target. I'm going to refer primarily to MER. MER would be like if your main focus is ROAS. But yeah, if you're a consumable, if you're a free plus shipping offer, and you're mostly concerned with cost per purchase or CPA, you need your true target, your overall target. Here are a couple formulas that you can use to calculate that if you don't already know. So here's how you do it. You run your ratio for each platform. So let's say your ROAS on Facebook is 2.5 for a given time period, a week time period, and your MER for that same time period is 3.5. So the formula here is we're going to divide 2.5 by 3.5, and we're going to come up with our ratio. So in this case, our Facebook ROAS to MER ratio is 71%. In which case our Facebook target ROAS is 71% of our target MER, right? Or target MER times 0.71. So if our target MER is 3, that makes our Facebook ROAS target 2.13. Quite a bit of math there. So again, if you need to kind of revisit it, go over it a couple times, feel free. So again, this is a running calculation. So you can run that calculation as often as daily if you're running really high volume. I recommend just starting with weekly. And make sure you're using time intervals that give significant data. So like I said before, if you're running really low volume, maybe it's monthly or every 2 weeks. But yeah, weekly or daily if it's really high volume on most of our accounts. So continuing on flexible models. So what you might be looking at by saying that is like, well, that doesn't really take into account like a lot of things, like how much of my budget I'm spending on various traffic channels and stuff like that. You're right. So there's another layer to this. So if you're running a flexible model, the thing that you need to understand is that you're never going to have 100% confidence in where your sales are coming from. So the nice thing about a hard model, like I said earlier, is that you're saying, hey, I run last click and I'm going to give 100% of the credit to the last click, and this funnel is my source of truth. Now that might not be true actually, right? Like somebody might see you on Google and Facebook and then convert through email and you gave 100% to email, but you've made that decision up front. You've said, I know that happens and I'm giving 100% to email. Flexible model, you're saying, no, I don't want to do that. I want to spread the credit around where it's due. But the thing about that is you can never like answer the question of like, where are my sales coming from? You can only gain degrees of confidence. Like, hey, I'm 90% confident that when I'm, at this ROAS on Facebook and this ROAS on Google, I'm doing really well, right? So here's how you gain those degrees of confidence. You start making hypotheses. So for example, you might say, hey, you know what? I have a hypothesis that Google's effect on my MER is stronger than Facebook's. And then I'm going to test that hypothesis by making drastic changes to my budget allocation and measuring, what happens to my MER. So right now, if I'm spending 70% of my budget on Facebook and 30% on Google, maybe I'll flip those two for a couple weeks and see what happens to my MER, because I think Google will actually have I think Google's correlation with my MER, my Google to MER ratio I'm more confident in it than my Facebook to MER ratio. All right. So you just make different hypotheses like that to collect different data points around these ratios that you have running for each individual traffic channel. And then the other thing you want to do with a flexible model is you just want to create allowable budget buckets at various performance levels. So we start with a no matter what spend, but here's a good example. For let's say we're on Facebook and we know and based on our ROAS calculations, our ROAS to MER ratio, our happy ROAS on Facebook is about 2.75. We know we want to hit about 2.75. So we might talk about an allowable bucket where we say, all right, let's spend, $50,000 per week. Let's spend $50,000 this week, no matter what. Whatever our ROAS is, we're going to spend $50,000 unless otherwise notified. Because we want to, even if we're not performing really well, even if we're having a poor performance period, we want to continue to test and find winning audience in creative combinations. Now, if our ROAS is 2+, we'll spend up to $100,000. So spend up to $100,000 if we're 2+ on that ROAS. Spend up to $200,000 if we're 2.5+. Spend up to $400 if we're 3+, and unlimited spend if we're 3.5. Now, this is a little different than how we used to do it. We used to just say, hey, try and hit 2.75, and then once you hit 2.75, unlimited spend. Because we're not 100% confident, because we're using a flexible model, you'll notice that I capped the spend even above our target ROAS at 3.0. I still capped the spend because I don't have that 100% confidence. I only have degrees of confidence. So I'm not going to say, hey, as soon as you hit 2.76, spend to the moon. I'm not going to do that until I'm at a really, really confident level, which in this case is 3.5. So that should make sense to you. Just you only have degrees of confidence, so set those kind of buckets up. And then we also want to use North Star metrics as bumpers. So we want to track our overall MER, cost per purchase, whichever is more relevant to us. And then sometimes we need a few North Star metrics that push and pull on each other. So for example, we have a brand that sells baby clothing, Posh Peanut, where they have a few that push and pull on each other. So cost of acquisition, so these high level metrics that don't depend on reporting from the ad channels at all. They're true metrics that they can pull, with true data. Cost of acquisition of a new customer, volume of new customers, MER, and revenue are their sort of push and pull, right? So cost of acquisition of a new customer pushes and pulls on volume of new customers. MER pushes and pulls on revenue. So using those North Star metrics as bumpers is key, right? So if you're setting those spend and performance buckets that I talked about above, you set those, but then you might still say, okay, but end of the day, we need to be running a 3 MER or better. So if we're in that spend 50,000 no matter what category, but our MER is dropping to 2.7, 2.8 midweek, we know, what, we need to pull back. We can only spend 30,000, right? So use those true north metrics as bumpers. And then if you're an advanced stat person, you can always run a Pearson model to calculate the R&P value of your ratios, your ROAS to MER ratios. And then, you can kind of statistically model how close you think that relationship is. That's a kind of more advanced thing. So if you understand that bullet point, go for it, or don't, your call. Okay. So taking a quick breath here, there was a lot of math in that last section. This next kind of thing that I'm going to go through, that kind of concludes how we're calculating our on-platform targets. And we're kind of laying out how we day trade our ad accounts. That's how we're modeling our data and finding the right targets for, Facebook Ads Manager, Google Ads Manager, or whatever. That kind of wraps up that part. So for the next couple minutes, just a few minutes here, I'm going to do what I call tinfoil hat time. So these are just kind of like trends and shifts that are happening, specifically on Facebook. Facebook is this really black boxy platform. The reason I call it tinfoil hat time is because these are sort of just my tinfoil hat theories. Based on some observations. I'm not saying that they're true or not true. I'm just sharing them with you. They're findings across all of our, spend that we're managing. So, they're kind of just like my opinion. So, first of all, one of the things that we're shifting toward right now is getting the problem out of the black box. Like I said, Facebook is this black boxy platform where you put your dollars in and they kind of have this algorithm, and like you don't really know the combination of things that you're doing that's working well. Like, why is this creative converting and this one isn't? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is this audience converting and this one isn't? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But Facebook's like, just trust us, which was totally fine when it was performing really well. But if it's not performing really well, then my trust goes away a little bit. So we're kind of moving toward like getting the problem out of the black box. So we have a very strong finding that Facebook does this thing where it regularizes our cost per click. So what this might look like is in an ad account, let's say we have a $20 CPM in an ad account and we have a 1% click-through rate, we have about a $2 cost per click. So then if we go in and we say, hey, let's see if we can improve our click-through rate, like lower our cost of traffic a little bit, and we improve that click-through rate to 1.5%, yay! Facebook goes, okay, cool. Now we're just going to increase your CPMs to $30 and your clicks still cost $2. So we've always thought Facebook regularizes our ad account in some way. Like it doesn't really let us get the, ROAS we want at whatever level. It sort of like regularizes it. But we've seen like strong data that indicates it's regularizing our click costs. So we can't do a ton to actually change our cost of traffic, which is a big deal for accounts where the cost of traffic is really high. So if we have an account where we're not at target, we start to just think about what is a convertible click cost here, right? So if we had a reasonable conversion rate, what kind of cost per click could we handle here? And then we just optimize on the conversion side instead of throwing so many optimizations into the platform. So we basically just say, all right, let's just get our cost per click way down. We have a couple caveats on that. We still want to be optimizing for purchases, and we still want an ad landing page flow where we believe, it will sell, like we're actually reasonably selling the product. But the way that we get that cost per click way down so that we can optimize on the landing page and conversion side is we just look for ways to shake up the black box. So instead of improving that CTR by 40%. We're like, all right, how can we improve our CTR by 400%? Because we don't think Facebook's going to go with us on the regularization. It's not going to change our CPMs from $20 to $80. So we can actually improve our click cost by making a drastic change in our creative, and improving our click-through rate by a lot. Right? So we might do this with advertorials or memes or something like that. So doing this ahead of Q4, it kind of allows you to highlight different customer profiles and use cases, and prospect into different markets. And then kind of build big traffic and engagement buckets to re-engage with in Q4, with just like an overlying kind of sales message or offer message. So here's an example, right? Boom by Cindy Joseph on the left. They've been doing this for a long time, but running ads to an article that highlights different use cases. So 10-minute makeup to bring out your natural beauty in 3 simple sticks versus 5 makeup tips for older women. Those are different use cases for different types of avatars that you're sort of prospecting into different areas and shaking up the black box and possibly lowering your click costs, and then building different buckets of retargeting people that you kind of know more about based on what they clicked for your Q4 strategy. Okay, so next up, concept testing versus asset iterations. So last year, like quote unquote creative testing basically just meant, throw a bunch of assets together or iterate on your assets a lot. What we're finding now is it's more about angles, right? So I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but essentially like think how you can make a drastic change to your creative to really change the angle and really change the look, as opposed to just taking this clip and moving it to the front and taking this clip and moving it to the third clip and stuff like that, right? Those angle tests are actually where we're finding our wins instead of the asset iterations, which asset iterations was the big play in 2020. And then last but not least, Google for the win. So over the past few months, we've had a few brands that have kind of shifted significant budget to Google. And it's actually cracked for some brands that, used to only be able to run branded search. So if you're running Google already, definitely push more into Google ahead of Q4 so that you can continue to spend and build those retargeting pools while still driving some sales. And there's some spots you can get in touch with me if you want to get in touch with me. I have a YouTube channel. You can email me. And then, Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is mostly me posting pictures of my kids. So, beware if you do follow me there. And that's it. That's kind of, I'm never good at the dismount on these things. So I'm kind of like that guy, but that's sort of the end.
Incredible. Thank you so much, John. I learned a ton. I just learned a ton off the back of this, particularly your coverage on this flexible modeling. Where you're absolutely right. We have to adjust with the lack of data, and I really like some of the models you gave, especially the ratios you gave.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your thoughts on Q4 in general from a performance marketing standpoint? I guess iOS 15 is going to launch be prior to Q4. What do you think about iOS 15 and Q4?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I think that let me just kind of make a general high level statement about this too, and not necessarily iOS 15 specific. I think we're sort of heading toward a world where like we've had this really nice, really good like tracking methodology for a while, and it's been really easy for like the platforms that we use, the email platforms that we use, the ad platforms we use, all of that to just give us the data back. And we're moving towards something where it's a little bit more like traditional advertising, like TV, billboards, stuff like that, where it's very difficult for them to give the advertisers back data on what's working. That said, direct response marketing has been around for long before the internet. Performance marketing has been around for long before the internet. So I think a lot of it is focusing in on like messaging that like, kind of what I was saying about creative testing a second ago. Instead of just like, let's test a whole bunch of different iterations and then use the data to say what is the best, it's more thinking around your customer avatar, your customer profile. Who are they? What is the angle that you're going to use to get their attention and speak to them? How are you going to show that and convey that in an ad? What is the landing page environment? And then from a data perspective, you're kind of doing the best you can to build a model that will work for you to decide to essentially just make decisions. So, I mean, that's kind of like my high level thinking about this. And in Q4, the messaging kind of gets easy, right? So it's about your offer, right? So I think a lot of the work for Q4 happens ahead of Q4. How are you getting people's attention and messaging different customer avatars so that they're aware of your brand ahead of Q4, so that once Q4 comes, all you have to do is put that sale message in front of them.
Fire up. Yeah, makes sense. And from an impressions and decision-making standpoint, are you looking at like impression thresholds or spend thresholds in order to say, okay, this angle is not working, we're on to the next one? What key metrics are you looking at to just cut your losses or to double down?
Yeah, we still work with spend thresholds, kind of. It gets trickier because we know our data isn't right. And in many cases where, like, let's say the target cost per purchase for an ad account used to be like $40 or $50, and that is the actual target CPA for an ad account. You know, now it might be showing $200 or $250 in Facebook.
Yeah.
So, you know, typically we want to be spending enough to get a few conversions a day, but it's a little more difficult now. But that's still kind of what we're working with. You know, if we have the budget, we still want to be able to spend, all right, like, you know, maybe we can't be as confident as we used to be, but let's still be, you know, as confident as we can be and spend, you know, $400 or $500 on a creative or an angle or something like that. And if it's got nothing, then we'll cut our losses. We still use incrementality too, right? So we still say like, well, what does the target cost per add to cart and initiate checkout look like, so that we can make some decisions earlier on, right? If the target ATC is now $50. Well, if we get to $500 and spend, it has no sales and its ATC cost is $100, then we know it's not a good signal. If its ATC cost is like 25, maybe it is good.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, John. So viewers would be commenting below. If you have a chance, please answer the questions. But it's a pleasure, you know, having structured. Yeah, thank you for coming on Commerce SL.